For those of you who are not familiar with ClientSuccess, or you're just getting familiar with ClientSuccess, we are a customer success management platform and more. Historically, we have been a solo platform, really helping customers, what we said, manage from new to renew, so that entire post-initial sales life cycle. But we are so much more than that. Over the past several months, if you've been following our journey, we've had a series of acquisitions, including one of my personal favorites, Baton. If you're not familiar with Baton, it is an onboarding solution, but so much more. I do encourage you, if you are somebody who leads onboarding, whether it's in your customer success function, you're part of an implementation team, take a peek at it. You will not be disappointed. We have been moving folks over to our solution for the past several months now, and the feedback is fantastic. So if you're interested in learning more about Baton, you can go ahead and scan that QR code. It will bring you to some more information and get a demo scheduled. So if you are interested, I definitely recommend you go check it out. Welcome back to the CS Leadership Bootcamp webinar series. I'm your host, Christy Faltruso. I'm the Chief Customer Officer here at ClientSuccess and oversee our entire post-initial sales team that is success, services, and support. We are now in our onboarding edition of this webinar series. Now, all of these thematically, if you've been following along, have been related to onboarding, and today is no different. Today, we're going to talk about how you consider the learner. We're going to talk about designing a flexible and diverse onboarding program with your end user in mind. We have covered tons of stuff so far. This is the third session. We still have one to go. So hopefully you will come back next week and join us for the final session in this series until next quarter, when we'll be back again. All right, let's get started. All right, you know me, I love to align on why we are here, and I thought these stats were pretty interesting and compelling enough for me to entertain doing something a little different. Hopefully they have the same impact on you as well. So a few stats that I walked away with was 65% of people are visual learners, 30% prefer reading or writing, and 5% rely on auditory learning. Now, I don't know, which you are, and maybe you can do a little self-reflection here and figure out like which one do you prefer. I have loved the shift towards video content. Me personally, it has helped me get up to speed a little bit faster. I don't like reading a lot of stuff. That's a personal thing. Maybe it's a speed thing. But so for me, that is how I like to learn. Do some self-reflection and kind of think about what are the ways that you like to learn. Now, what was interesting to me is that although we can see statistics about the fact that there are so many different ways people like to learn, most onboarding programs today are designed as if every person learns the same way. And I know that that's not true because me, my daughter, my husband, and we're only thinking about our house, probably all three of us are very different in our learning styles. My husband, he can listen to everything on a podcast or an audiobook. I absolutely cannot. My daughter likes to read things and she likes to rewrite and translate. That is her learning style. And I like video. So it was interesting as I was preparing our content for this session and talking at home with my family, all three of us had very different learning styles. And so that's an example, right? I mean, 100% of us in the house, like we all like different ways of learning. And, I think it's something that we need to be more thoughtful about when we're considering our end users and how we design programs for them. So it's something I really want us to focus on today. What we're going to cover is how do we do this? What are the different ways we should be leaning into it? I'll talk to you a little bit about tools that I love, things that are making it really easy. And obviously the most important thing is progress over perfection, which we'll talk a bit about. Now, why does this matter? Now, I don't know how you guys are all viewing maybe onboardings that you have been through yourself or programs that you're designing for your end users. But what we're seeing is that there is a mismatch in onboarding, right? And when there's slow adoption and increased churn. If folks can't learn your product, they're not going to use it. Right? And they're not going to use it well. And that's going to be a challenge as you think about trying to help them realize value. And so this is really important as you think about, okay, well, we want to get our end users adopting our solution, integrating it into their workflows so that they can see some ROI. Well, if they can't get past the learning stage, it's going to make those other outcomes pretty difficult. The second thing here is customers retain only 10% of what they hear, but 90% of what they experience. Now, I thought that was really interesting. Personally, it's kind of like the idea that we need to hear things multiple times before it sticks. And I know that is very true for me, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but the experience makes a big difference. And so even how we consider guiding our customers and those end users through our onboarding experiences makes a very big difference. And the third point here that I want to hit on is just that a well-designed onboarding program can boost retention by 30% or more. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if somebody put that statistic in front of me and said, Christy, you can increase your retention by 30%, I'm literally all ears. These are the types of stats that I want to bring internally back to my team to get the buy-in and to start doing things a bit differently. So I was hoping that we can all just align on some of these statistics and this information to make sure that we're all on the same page. And that is that we have to consider a different way to approach how our end users learn and to make sure that we're giving them what they need the way they need it when they need it. All right, let's talk through pitfalls. My favorite thing to do is fail. I think I'm the queen of that personally, but there are some common pitfalls that we all navigate with onboarding, and these things definitely have an impact on adoption. So the first one is this idea that there's this one size fits all content style. Most onboarding programs I have designed in the past have had that, right? Where it's like, great, everything is either a live session with a CSM or maybe it's self-guided content for a scaled journey, but we didn't have very many variations, right? It wasn't this choose your own adventure. You didn't give people options. It was very much like, nope, this is how we onboard you. Kind of fall in line was the attitude. And while I think that we're all bought into this idea that we want to have diversity in how we educate and enable folks, I think most of us are probably sitting on a one size fits all content strategy around onboarding. The next thing is this overwhelming information dump. Oh my gosh. Again, I'm notorious for this one. We used to jam pack everything into onboarding, guys. And listen, I know I'm not the only one because I have attended onboarding sessions where I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Too much, slow down. And if I feel that way, and I think I have pretty good technical aptitude, if you've got a very technical product, maybe not a technical audience, and you're overwhelming them with information, they're not going to grasp that. That's not going to change the behaviors. It's not going to drive adoption. So think about how much information are we giving our end users at any point in the onboarding experience. The next thing we see is lack of flexibility for different learning styles. Now, this goes back to today's session and why we're all here today is figure out, okay, well, what are the different ways that we can design content to drive the outcome? Right now, like I said, most programs that I have attended is this one size fits all. I've had some where it's, instructor led throughout the entire thing. I've had some where it's completely like self-learning. Chrissy, go figure this out, watch the videos, do the thing. Great, check, check, check. Others where they have been a little bit more bespoke for our needs and our organization, but that is very, very rare. So think about yours for a second. How many options do you offer? In fact, if you want to do like a little engagement self-fun poll, head over the chat. Do you have 1, 2, 3, or more different variations of content for onboarding? Go drop a number in the chat. I'll watch them come in. This is also a gut check to see how many of you are listening and actually paying attention to me. Thank you, Deborah, for being the first brave soul. All right, some of you have 2, 3. Okay, I relate with the ones. There's some ones, threes, 2, 2, 3, 1. Okay. I have to say, I am so excited to see how many of you aren't 1. But I'm actually a little shocked, right? Like I'm so glad to see it, but it's refreshing to see that so many of you are kind of advancing and saying like, we want to consider the end user and we're creating all the different variations of content to help them learn the way they want, how they want, when they want. So that's great. Continue to feed your insights in here, 1, 2, 3, or more. That's fine. Love to see that in the chat. Okay, and the last one here is no iteration based on customer feedback. Okay, something I probably did in the past, I definitely don't do anymore, is that you design this program, you probably over-engineer it, over-architect it, and then you roll it out and you're so proud and you're patting yourself on the back, and then you just run with it. And that's where it stops. One of the things that we've started doing over the past several years here at ClientSuccess is before I actually do anything major in terms of redesigning or re-architecting or thinking about how we're going to restructure our team or the resources and how we engage our customers, is I go get a litmus test. I go and reach out to some of our customers and I present some of the ideas that I'm having and some of the changes I want to make to get their feedback. And then what I do is I take that back and I iterate on it. We don't see enough iteration on this. I don't know how many of you are currently doing things like onboarding surveys throughout or even afterwards when onboarding is concluded, but being able to just see and hear from your customers what worked, what didn't work, what did they like, what didn't they like. Now, obviously, there's a ton of metrics that we're going to measure along the way to help us understand, okay, it doesn't matter if they liked it or didn't like it, is it actually working? Because that is the end objective. So I would love to just, as we're kind of talking through, if you guys are not doing any surveys or collecting customer feedback throughout, definitely something you should be considering. But even a more formal structure around that would be super helpful just so you can continue to design something that is best for your end users. All of us have different end users in terms of their technical aptitude, their understanding of our products, learning styles, right? And so it's so important for you to just make sure that you really have a good handle on who the personas are and making sure that you're delivering content in a way that will be well received by them. All right, so let's talk through these major learning styles and some of the content that we could actually create to help them. Now, this is where it's like super easy to kind of lean into creating a diverse array of content for your end users. But the first one here is visual learners. Think about this as like your video walkthroughs, infographics, diagrams, things that they can look at that really help them understand, okay, this is what I have to do. I love pictures. I like screenshots, break it down for me, show me exactly where I have to click. I love it when I log into a knowledge base because I'm trying to figure something else, help me help myself. And instead of just reading a long page, what I can actually do is see screenshots where they have things like bolded and circled and highlighted, and I know exactly what to do and where to click. When it's just written for me, I have a tough time or a harder time following along. So when you think about your visual learners, these are ways that you can go and do that. The next one here is your auditory learners. Think about live walkthroughs. This could be where you have that kind of one-to-one, but it could also be live walkthroughs. It could be on demand as well. Narrated guides, podcasts are really interesting to think about that as an avenue that you can leverage. But anybody who is an auditory learner would benefit from these types of styles of content. Next, you have your reading and writing learners. Think about this as your step-by-step guides, checklists, documentations. I think knowledge bases do a really great job of this. Here's a little product plug. I am not sponsored, but I love Scribe. If you guys are not familiar with Scribe, I think a lot of support teams are using Scribe to go and create knowledge-based content and learning content very easily. They have some great AI functionality as well, but it allows you to just really create good, thorough content that has visuals. It can be video. Some of it is AI driven, which is also really helpful and allows you to move a bit faster. But I think Scribe is a great tool for this type of content. Sean, I'm glad that you love Scribe too. But it's been super helpful. We've used it a couple times and it's just, I think about the power behind it. So even finding great tools that help you guys do the things you need to do, there's so many solutions out there, and there's even some free ones that we can consider. And the last one is and I'm going to say this wrong, yeah, okay. Yes, you can read. Okay, so I'm not going to say it because I've said it like 4 times wrong today practicing for this, so I'm not going to do that to myself. But this is going to be your hands-on training, your sandbox environments, and your interactive exercises. This I really love is when you have your guided experience. Now, I know that is difficult to scale, but for organizations where you have that one-to-one, you have access to a CSM, an onboarding manager, an implementation manager, and they're actually walking you through what to do and how to do it, very kind of workshop style. I am a big fan for that. Now, I know that doesn't always scale. Onboarding can be very complex, but being able to offer that kind of hands-on training is awesome. Sandbox environments where people can go and tinker and play around without feeling like they're going to break something, also really powerful. I see this really done really well in the sales process when you're offering folks access to maybe a demo environment where they can go and play and start to learn a little bit about your solution, how to configure it. That's also really helpful. And interactive exercises. One of my favorite onboarding experiences actually included a scavenger hunt where I had to go and do things and find things. They kind of hid things in the platform for us to go and find. And I, the competitive person that I am, loved that because I got to see a score at the end, how many things I got right, didn't get right, found, didn't find. And then they gave prizes out at the end too. I mean, it was super fun. But there's so many creative ways that we can lean into this. So when you have a good handle on who your learners are, designing for them becomes easier. But if you have a diverse set of learners, you've got to figure out where do you start. And these are different examples of things and content you can create to help you achieve that. So the first thing I want to talk about is how do you build a flexible onboarding program? So this is a rule of thumb, offer 2 to 3 ways. So for those of you who said 2, which a lot of you said 2, you're right on the money. I think that we don't need to get to like, we have 4, we have 15. Find 2 ways, right? We have video content, we have self-guided, we have on demand, and we have a guided experience with a CSM or an onboarding manager. Now, what's interesting is I often see that there are different styles of content delivery, but what I also see is that they're not necessarily available to everybody. So for example, How neat would it be if you showed up to your onboarding kickoff and you asked your customers and said, what is the preferred method that you all would like to go through for onboarding? We offer these, and almost offer it as a buffet and allow them to opt into one of those. What I find is that if you've got a customer who is in an enterprise segment or an SMB segment, SMB, you might say, oh, you know what? You're exclusively scaled on demand. Here's some videos. Go watch that. Good luck. If you are, an enterprise, we're creating this bespoke experience for you where it's guided with a person. But your customers may not need and or want what we're offering. So wouldn't it be great if you actually allowed your customers or those end users to opt into the way that they learn best and go through their program? I don't see enough of that. If you guys are offering that, super cool. I would love to see more organizations do that. I never seem to get an option. I see different ways that they're doing it, but I don't know that I've ever been presented with, hey, Christy, what do you prefer? I don't know if that's ever been offered. So if you are doing that, cool, good for you. Nice done, nice job. But if you're not doing that, something to consider. Again, I know scale is a consideration here, resourcing is a consideration here, but if you can do that, it would be really nice. Now you have this like kind of idea that you have a tiered content approach. I've seen folks offer different types of content at different stages. So for example, you might have upfront, if you're doing some integration work or maybe there's a technical configuration that's required, you're offering that as kind of like that one-to-one upfront and saying like, we have an implementation manager and they're going to help you get your platform integrated with your core solutions and get some things built out. And then once you're done with that, we kind of move you on to this next part of the program. And I've seen things architected that way. And I think that could be really interesting. You can tier it out based on segmentation, and that's okay if that makes the most sense for your business. It may not be the best experience for end users, but at least you're offering some kind of diversity there. And then you have the just the notion of like, is it guided or is it ad hoc, right? Like, do we want people to go on a journey where we are prescribing for them what to do and when to do it? Or do you want people to kind of go through and allow them to opt into different onboarding experiences as they need it? So if you have a modular product, for example, let's just assume I'm going to use ClientSuccess for simplicity's sake for my benefit only, but our product has a whole bunch of different offerings. And so if we think about it through the lens of customer success, if you've not used a customer success management platform before, think about it like this. If my customer was really focused and said, you know what, all I care about right now is designing my health score. Well, if the health score module in my onboarding program was stage 5, does my customer now need to wait until we get to stage 5 to do the thing that's most important to them? That would stink, right? Because now think about it, the time to value is shifted because it's based off of our time to their value and not them driving and dictating that. So think about it that way also, right? If your product is not something that has to be designed linearly, like we have to do this before this, if there's not kind of like prerequisites for something else, think about offering them the ability to opt into things as they need and or want it. Something else that I've seen that I thought was really interesting is people that have a live onboarding experience, but what they'll do is they say, you know what, this week we're covering 1, next week is 2, the week after that is 3, and they kind of have like an 8-week cycle, but people can jump in it as they need it. As long as they complete all 8 weeks, they finish it. But me, maybe I'm starting in week 3. Somebody else could be starting in week 1. Somebody else starting week 8. And it doesn't matter where we start because we're going to cycle through all 8 sessions. I've seen that, and I actually really like that as well, where I've been guided in a group kind of one-to-many experience, but I'm getting that live interaction from a live trainer. And as long as I complete my 8 weeks, I've completed the entire onboarding experience. It doesn't really matter where I start or stop. So I thought that was really neat and a different way to approach this. So these are just all different things to consider. And I liked that because honestly, if you just have a cycle of those onboarding sessions and anybody can jump in at any time, you're not having to offer this kind of linear experience where it's like, great, okay, I've got 7 customers I'm onboarding and all of them have to get week 1 and we're doing them as individuals, or I've got 3 week 1 and 3 week 2s technically based on where they are in their individual journeys. If you had that cycle, they can hop in and out as they need, and you can also still offer maybe like an AMA once a week or things like that. So, I'd encourage you to just get creative, right? We're only limited by our imagination on what could work. So let's talk through the strategy here. There are different types of content to consider. And so when we think about this specific content here, short form in terms of like quick wins, 30-second videos, GIFs, FAQs. We've seen this. So think about it like as short form content. Now, I don't know about you all, but TikTok has officially broken me, which means I have the attention span of like a gnat. I can't watch anything for more than like 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. 10 minutes most. And because we're so used to just, kind of scrolling through and consuming short form content. And I know, again, I'm not alone here because I watch the stats on TikTok. I have my own channel. So I get to see how people are engaging in things. People like short form content. It's something to explore. So you have to think like, is this a content strategy for us? Do we have to have types of short form content? Maybe there's certain things you can break down into bite-sized bits. Then number two here, you've got long form. Is there certain content that just requires a deep dive, right? It can't be explained in 3 minutes or less. It does require some depth to it. And so maybe these are going to be webinars, maybe they're full guides. I've seen really beautiful things done through certification courses where, again, that could be an on-demand style, but where you're going through, you're getting trained on some content, you're taking exams to, validate that you know now how to do something after you've watched or consumed the content. So what does that long form content look like for you? Next is the live walkthroughs and webinars. We've talked about this. I particularly like this. I like the ability to ask somebody live. So just like I said to you all, if you've got questions, drop them in. I'll answer them at the end. Having the ability to interact with somebody, an expert, is really helpful for me personally. So I think that's something else to consider. Can you offer live walkthroughs or webinars? I've seen the webinars on demand. I have trouble differentiating, like, how is a webinar that's on demand different than long form video content that just lives somewhere, right? To me, it feels the same. Maybe it's different. You all can tell me that I'm crazy and I'm not thinking about it the right way, but maybe that's required if you have very complex onboarding. So I think also thinking about the complexity of what it is that your solution does and also kind of the ramp up period. So for example, at one of the companies I worked at, we had a very complex solution and it took a long time for customers to get stood up, to get it deployed. We're talking months, not weeks. And so in that case, there did require us to have some of the longer form content just because you couldn't answer things in 3 minutes. It really did require us to go a bit deeper. And so we actually had to have some diversity in content here because there was things that we had to have admins understand versus people that were kind of running the projects. Everyone had different information that they had to consume. So I think that's also important as you think about, well, what's the type of content that we're creating? Who has to consume it? Who's the persona? What are we trying to educate them on? Is it like a quick how-to, or is it something more in-depth where we're also introducing strategy and change management? So all of those things need to be considered. Next here, which kind of goes with like 2 and 3 a little bit, is, like I said, those on-demand modules, but for self-paced learning. This is great. Again, if you're trying to move your customers through a scaled program, this is obviously a very great and proven approach, is being able to allow people to move at their own pace. Now, the challenge that I have with that is for onboarding is that onboarding can go on in perpetuity, right? Like you can be stuck in onboarding jail, for better or worse, because you're like, all right, I'll get to it when I get to it. And guess what? Like there's this lack of accountability and nobody gets to it because we're all busy. And so that makes it very difficult to ensure that somebody is actually consuming the content and moving through the program effectively. Now, obviously, there is tons of ways that you can track, measure, and monitor that. I've seen it in the solutions. I've seen automations done beautifully as well, where you have somebody who's kind of fallen off of the onboarding track, and then you're sending emails and alerts and all of these things to kind of get them back. But there is something to be said about accountability. And sometimes this is kind of like my trainer mentality from like going to the gym. Some people don't need somebody to teach them how to use the equipment at the gym. They have a trainer for accountability, somebody who's going to go and show up with them to make sure that they're doing the things that need to get done. That to me is the same mindset. So if you're somebody who requires that and you know that about yourself, I am somebody who loves an accountability buddy. It is helpful for me to have calendars, things on the calendar, things that I have to do by certain dates. Deadlines are really helpful. So again, thinking about that taking that into consideration, different content type. And then last is this kind of concept of like office hours or coaching sessions. This might be better for high touch needs, but what I really love is office hours or like an AMA that's available to all of your customers. It doesn't matter if they've gone through a self-guided experience, or if they've had this very bespoke one where you're meeting with a regular, like, again, CSM, onboarding manager, implementation manager. It doesn't really matter. You might still have questions. And so I like the idea of having like a weekly standing onboarding AMA where you tell everybody who's in onboarding, technically in onboarding, you could make it available to all your customers if you'd like. But I like to kind of create the cohort kind of exclusive for onboarding customers and say, if you have any questions, join. Now, I'll tell you, customers will show up even if they don't have questions because they want to hear other people's questions and get answers. So making it available to everybody, even if they just hop on and listen and learn, I think it could be pretty powerful. And again, you're reaching people at scale, which a lot of us are trying to figure out, right? How do we do more one-to-many kind of content approaches? This could be a great one, is that office hours. Now, obviously, the only thing with that is if your product is very customizable, not configurable, right? So think like blank sheet of paper. They're going to have questions that are kind of exclusive to them and their environment. It may not be widely applicable. So depending on your product, that may or may not be a fit either. These are just things to consider. If your product is going to be so unique for every deployment, then their questions that they're going to ask are going to be unique to them, not going to be super valuable to everybody else. But if you've got a product that is configurable and your customers have questions and they're coming along, again, things that will benefit the masses, it's a great way to kind of use that strategy. So again, things that we can consider as we approach our content creation. All right, how to administer the content. I think this is really important because we can create great content, but if we're not administering it appropriately, it's going to make it difficult for people to consume. So let's just talk through some of the different methods and ways that we can share that content out. Again, I have seen some very creative things. I'm going to share some of those, but we'll start with some basics. The first one I've seen is an LMS, right? A learning management system. There are tons of solutions on the market that offer this, but being able to place your content and create a guided experience becomes really, really beautiful in an LMS. I think it's easy to use. Most of them are easy to use. Again, you're guiding. There's a lot of data and statistics around how people are consuming it, where they're falling off, if there's a 10-minute video, are they watching 2 minutes of it? So lots to learn if you've got access to a platform like that. Again, super helpful. If you can afford them, great. I highly recommend. But if you can't, there's other solutions, and I'll talk to you about those. The second is a certification platform. They might not be mutually exclusive. I've seen a lot of LMS systems that do offer certification built in, and this is the ability to kind of take a test or a quiz or a certification exam at the end. So the ability to watch and learn or consume some content and then validate your consumption, your learning with questions, things like that. But I've also seen companies just create certification programs. And this could be your like level 2 content, level 3, level 4, however you want to position it. But if you've got an onboarding experience that says like, basically this is all of our 101, but if you really want to go deeper on our product, again, if you have a product that offers this depth and complexity, maybe you have a certification program that takes it a step further. And so that's something else to consider, right? What is the level of depth we want our content to go through? And then if we want to go a bit deeper, what does that look like? How do we want to validate their learning? Something else could be an onboarding portal. We've seen these really built out beautifully with onboarding solutions. I will plug our product Baton again. We do have a customer portal that allows our customers to share with their customers, who are the end users of the Baton tenant, to see where they are in the onboarding experience. You can plug in video content, things like that. So it could be that you have a portal that's exclusive for onboarding. And like I said, our product is, I think, one of a few that offer something like that. It helps, again, give your customers access to that information when they need it. And then lastly, I've seen people just use their website. We do not need to over-engineer and overcomplicate things. So maybe you're just posting content on your website for folks to go through. If you've got an easy to use, again, configurable, not customizable product, it could just be as easy as putting some things on your website. Now, I'll tell you a little hack that I did a few years ago. I was struggling. I wanted to create an onboarding environment for my customers. And so I built a Google website. Okay, if you're part of the Google suite, creating a Google site doesn't cost you anything extra. And it's super easy to build and design. If you guys are interested and want to see what ours look like, you can follow up with me afterwards, and I'm happy to send you a link and kind of point you in the direction. But I had created this onboarding portal using Google Sites. And because YouTube is a Google product, I was able to create videos in YouTube, upload them, create them private, add them to my portal, and allow people to have video content. I linked to all of our knowledge base articles. I had some short form content in there as well. They've got a ton of flexibility in terms of like functionality. How do you display things, right? So I was able to add visuals and carousels, video content. I was able to upload my decks because, again, Google Slides is part of their product. I uploaded project plans because Google Sheets. So the Google site I thought was actually so cool. My customers loved it. I had a bunch of customers who I actually trained on how to build their own custom site in Google Sites to create their own onboarding experience. So I say this because, again, we're only limited by our imagination. If you are very clear on what it is that you're trying to achieve, you should be able to look around and figure out how to use what you have at your disposal. I have worked in organizations where I have had endless funds. I mean, like not really endless, but I've had money, and I've worked in organizations where my budget has been very, very small. And I will tell you, as somebody who has learned how to operate with less, I am so creative. I can figure out a way to do anything. Just give me some time and I will come up with a way. So I say that because if you're somebody who's sitting around going, I can't afford an LMS, or I can't afford, an onboarding solution, there are ways to do this that don't cost you any money. And so I would encourage you all to just be very creative about how you're thinking about it. So, what or who to roll out to first is always very interesting. Now, I am a big advocate of pilot programs. Guys, I cannot tell you enough. Before you go and over engineer, over architect, spend weeks and months building out the perfect onboarding experience, and then say, great, we're going to roll this out to all of our customers, start with a pilot. Create a cohort of customers that you're going to test this new thing out with. I'm going to say that, like, yes, I've got a few different things. Who do you start with here? I'm saying start with a small cohort. Find some folks that you can actually even talk to about in the sales process, maybe even, and say, hey, if you find out that your sales team is like, hey, they're super friendly, they want to be part of our growth journey, they want to be partners, lean into those prospects. And as those deals close, say, we are so thrilled that we were going to work with you on this. We're designing an entirely new onboarding experience for customers. Would love for you to be part of this beta. That's effectively what it is. And allow them to be part of it and say, you know what, we're going to reach out to you at the end of every week, collect some feedback, listen to you. And what did you like? What did you not like? What can we improve? And iterate with them. I tell you guys this all the time. For anybody who's listened to me talk about anything, I always say people want change to happen with them, not to them. So if you can pull people along for that journey, there's so much more buy-in. So start with a pilot, find out who these friendlies are in the sales process, learn from them, build with them, and I promise you guys will start to architect something that is going to be a lot more meaningful, a lot more useful. But if you don't believe me and you don't care what I have to say about starting with a pilot and you're just ready to roll out to everybody, who am I to tell you not to? Here's some things you should be considering. One is like, are we thinking about this like high touch, low touch customers? This is, I think, probably the more common split of this is like this idea of touch. I don't like the word touch. I would defer to high engagement, low engagement. But if you have a high engagement model, again, it could be based on your product and its complexity. If it requires it, okay, you might want to roll out to these higher engagement customers because of their needs and their complexities, versus maybe it's a lower touch segment that you have where you just don't have the resources to staff against it. And that is perfectly fine. Again, I am a big advocate of like, do what you can with what you have. Let's not over engineer it. Let's not wish and pray for something different. If you have this cohort of customers, maybe it makes sense because you're like, hey, I have to do something for them because I don't have the human capital to staff against it. That might be the best way to start. The next one is this kind of enterprise versus SMB, thinking about the needs. Now, this is nothing to do with like your structure, like the high engagement, low engagement, or high touch, low touch is your internal strategy. Now, when you think about like enterprise versus SMB, this tells you who your customer is, right? So high touch, low touch is your internal definition of these customers. Enterprise versus SMB says who they are. Right? Are they an enterprise organization? Are you going to be rolling this product out to hundreds of people, or are you rolling it out to 2 people? Right? If it's an SMB, maybe the entire company is 20 people. And so the people that are going to be using your product, it is 3 of them. I'll use the example. I used to work with GE as my customer. That is a large enterprise. right? GE is very big. So how we rolled out to them and all of their use cases and all of their end users had to be more thought out and had to have a different approach than when I worked at a company and we worked with literally SMBs, like mom and pop shop. And so our approach there is very different. I was training one person versus training hundreds of people. So maybe how I want to staff against that, or maybe the content that I'm designing needs to be considered there. And the last one is like when we think about the who, are these folks tech savvy? Right? Can they learn on their own, or are they less experienced users? I actually had been recently talking with a leader, actually last night, and we had a great conversation. And she was explaining to me, and she goes, Christy, like, our users, they're not tech savvy. They have been using pen and paper. I went to go grab a piece of paper. I can't find one. They're like, they use pen and paper. They are used to doing it that way. Getting them to move over to technology is painful. They're like, we have to move so slow. Our sessions are longer. We hold them accountable for more weeks. And I get that, right? So you have to think about who are they? And this is really good when you think about your personas of who are we actually designing for? Who's this program for? So these are your three things I would challenge you to consider. Your internal classification, are they high touch, low touch based on your program design? Is it enterprise or SMB? Who are they? And maybe what do they need? And then think about your personas. Are they somebody who's extremely tech savvy or maybe somebody with lower technical aptitude? Again, low technical aptitude, we're not saying that people are dumb, it's just familiarity. So think about who you're designing this content for. It makes it a lot, I think, better and more thoughtful in terms of how you even approach and roll this out. Tactical execution and best practices, things I will just advise based off of my own experiences as an end user who's been onboarded on tons of solutions, and then also as somebody who has designed several different iterations of programs over the years. First one is keep onboarding modular. Let people choose their path. I'm telling you, when you force people into your process and assume that that is best for them, they get frustrated. I mean, even still today, we design and architect beautiful programs and we say we're going to start here and we got to get you, from A to Z. Well, I told you, like, what if they just care about M and they got to get somewhere in the middle? But we're like, great, now I have to wait weeks before I get there. Let them, right? Let them lean into getting to where they need to go fast. When we think about time to value, that's going to help accelerate them. If they want to start with health scores, in my example, right? Let them start there. I'm not going to force them through all these other things before we get to that thing. If that is the one thing that's going to be really valuable for them, let them choose their path. Blend synchronous and asynchronous learning. I'm a big fan of this also, right? Not everything has to be delivered one-to-one. I'm a big adopter of Loom. So again, if I'm talking about another product I love, not sponsored, I am a big advocate of Loom. I love it. I love creating short little videos for people. They've got a question, I have an answer, and here's like, let me walk you through it. I don't have to book a meeting. We don't need an hour on the calendar. I can just share out content to you that you can consume the way that you consume it. I see Krista Roberts, she's on my team. She is probably our #1 Loom champion at ClientSuccess. You ask her a question, you're getting a Loom video 100% of the time. And I think that there's really a lot of value in that, right? How do you let people kind of learn when they need it in that moment versus waiting for things? So trying to figure out what is the proper blend of that synchronous versus asynchronous. Number 3 is use tooltips and in-app guidance. I know that we don't all have the luxury of having in-app guides, but man, if you can help your customers right when they're in the action, right, of doing something and explain to them how to do it, they're learning when they need it. So again, you're bringing them the information when and how, and in the platform makes it that much easier. Guide me through it. And so there is something to be said about that. If you can find a way to creatively use that, if you've got a platform, I know that there's also that ability is embedded in a lot of solutions that many of us are using today. I know if you're using like Pendo, they've got some stuff. If you're a customer of like WalkMe, they've got, obviously you're probably using it specifically for that, but there's other solutions that offer that same functionality that are worth exploring. So just also make sure that you know what's available in your tech stack. So many of us don't really know all the features and functionality of all the tools we have access to. So I'd also challenge you to find out, because there could be something really cool that you're not using today in a technology platform that you have access to. But I really love the experience of having that in-app guidance. The last one here is offer multiple formats for FAQs, troubleshooting, and feature training. Everything needs a different kind of piece of content to support it, right? There's stuff in your knowledge base, and I'm sure written format is totally fine. If people have FAQs, could be fine to have that written. It also makes things very easily searchable. So also think about that, like how and when will people be consuming this? Is it something that they'll want to look up very easily? If it's all embedded in video, that might be a little bit more difficult if you're not tagging it, if you don't have context along with it. I've seen a lot of companies create really great video, but then not tag the video. So I can't search it based on any criteria. They don't have any text around it. So I can't use any like keyword searches. So I literally am having to guess based on how the videos are named where I might find the information. Now, if I might find the information and it's in a 20-minute long video and I watch the 20 minutes and then I don't get my answer, I'm frustrated, right? And that's not the experience we want to design. So also just be very thoughtful about all of those elements of it as well. Measuring for success, again, you have to make sure that you've got metrics here, especially if you're letting folks go on a self-guided experience. Again, you can't leave them to their own devices. Like I said, if they're not being held accountable, so many people just fall off because it's not their top priority. So make sure that you're paying attention to adoption rate by format. So figure out which formats do your customers really tend to lean into. If you find that it's short form video content, mass produce the short form video content. If it is longer form or if it is one-to-one, pay attention to these things. That's going to help us understand what's working and what's not, and you can double down on that. Next is time to value. How long does it take for your users to complete onboarding? Now, time to value and completion of onboarding are two separate things. I don't like to use that nomenclature to define it because just because you completed onboarding doesn't mean that you have hit value. But in this example of just like how long it's taking folks to get through onboarding, that's very interesting, right? Like if you can accelerate someone's onboarding by weeks because you've created your content in video or self-guided or you have an LMS, thinking about the different ways that you're delivering the content, that's also really big. If I have to allocate one person to do onboarding and they're doing all the onboardings manually, that might slow things down, right? Scheduling, PTO, think about that. All these things are a bit preventative. So we want to get to a place where we can scale that. Pay attention to things like your support ticket reduction. If you're working on this for even ongoing training enablement and being able to say, okay, great, we just did feature release. Here we've got new video content. We've got some long form text stuff. We're going to do a webinar. We're going to do a workshop, whatever it is. Pay attention to what's happening in your support queue. Don't also assume that more support tickets is bad. It could be they're engaging with this content and they have more questions, and that could be a good thing. So remember, more isn't bad when it comes to support, but pay attention to what's happening in those tickets. And then lastly, make sure that you have some kind of feedback loop. I don't care if it's surveys or NPS or it's qualitative, you have somebody who's speaking to your customer, capture those insights. As many of you probably are experiencing, every call is recorded. I always say that I think it's funny. I show up to a meeting and there's more recording bots in the meeting than there are humans. So we know the calls are being recorded. What can you capture from those conversations? A lot of these tools are offering sentiment analysis. They're doing highlight reels, summaries, things like that. If there's something you can capture from the conversations you're having, use that as well. All right, so before we hop over to Q&A, and this is great because we will have a couple minutes today to get to some questions. Hopefully you have some. A few things I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with is one, onboarding is not a one size fits all. Just like customer success is not one size fits all. And I stress this all the time. Just because customer success looks one way at one company does not mean it's going to look the same way at another company. You have to design for your product, your company, your market, your end users, right? All of the things need to be considered. There are a ton of variables. The same thing applies to your onboarding. Okay. Do not design a one size fits all, not for your end users, not for your customers, not for your business. It does not work. Now, that doesn't mean that everything needs to be so bespoke, but you've got to give some optionality and flexibility in there. The second thing is offer multiple ways to engage. Remember, engagement doesn't mean a meeting. Okay. I consider customers engaged if they're attending a webinar, right? If you're one of my customers and you're here on the webinar today, you're engaged. It's different engagement, right? And so you can place different value on the types of engagement, but it's still engagement. So offer the ability to engage in different ways. It allows people to learn and lean in the way that they are comfortable doing it or the way that they have time. Start small and iterate fast. Like I said, I'm a big proponent of this. I see people want to build an architect and they're just like, they're perfectionists also. I don't know that anybody in customer success isn't striving for an A. And then what happens is we over engineer, we over architect, we spend all this time designing. The rollout is this Herculean effort. It takes so much time. We're rolling out to all of our customers. And then I often see teams having to roll back because things didn't work as planned, or the feedback isn't great, or it's not what everyone needed or thought it was going to be. Start small, right? Create a pilot program, test with some customers, some new customers coming out, or put it in front of some of your old friendly customers, right? When I say old, I mean like folks that are tenured with you in your relationship. They've been around for 3 or 4 years. Maybe you're going to do a re-onboarding. So it's a refresh with them and put the new program in front of those customers. Maybe there's less risk in testing this with existing customers as opposed to going to net new where it's their first experience with you. Something also to consider, right? Maybe I don't want to test with my new customers because I really want to pay attention to their experience. It's safer for me to go back to customers who have been with us for a long time and say, we're going to re-onboard you, but would you be open to trying out this new program that we're actually rolling out? Would love to get some feedback if that's cool with you. Most people will say yes. Again, people want change to happen with them, not to them. So if you start small and iterate fast, you'll be able to design something quicker that's going to be more valuable. And then lastly, you have to measure what matters, right? Figure out what the KPIs are that you're paying attention to. Now, they should be the ones that tell you, is this working? Okay. I don't care if they're watching the video for 3 minutes or 27 minutes. Are they getting to a place where they can use our product to drive value? Make sure the metrics that you're measuring are not just activity, that they're impactful, right? Just because we're doing something doesn't mean that we're getting value from it. So let's not assume, 1 + 1 = 2 all the time. We want to make sure that we're leaning in and we really understand, is this the right metric to tell us internally the right story? So that said, that is the wrap up for today's webinar. I am going to move over to questions, assuming that there are some for us. So the only question I have so far is, do you share the recording of these webinars? And yes, if you were not here at the beginning where I offered the logistics, everything is recorded and will be shared on our website, on our YouTube video, and our team will be sending it out. As long as you are registered for this series, you should be receiving an email. So please wait and stay tuned for that, but we'll be getting that out. Okay, we got another question, so I'll get to as many as I can. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to go to the Q&A. I'm happy to answer anything you have regarding this topic. The next one here is, would you suggest creating milestones for customers, maybe based on the onboarding path as a measurement of success? Absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. Yes, yes, yes. I love the idea of milestones, but you have to make sure that the milestone is indicative of the change that you want to see, right? So don't just make the milestone like they completed something. You have to see a change, or you have to see something that correlates with, like, did this work? So as long as you're measuring the right thing, milestones are great. Now, milestones are even better when you're communicating it back to your customers and socializing the value to it. So some of the onboarding sessions that we have at ClientSuccess, we are very clear in saying, like, great, now that you completed this, here's something that you're able to do now that you weren't able to do before. And so let's just assume that they just integrated all their data. Step one, right? Get all your systems together. You have now democratized your customer data. You and your team now have visibility and access to information to make informed decisions to run your business. That's a win, right? That is something that they weren't able to do before, but now, because of our solution and the session we just completed, you can do something. It is meaningful, but it's not enough for us to know that. We need to make sure that we're socializing it back with the customer so that they understand the value, and we're making sure that you're doing that early and often. So yes, on the milestones, make sure that you're also communicating it, make sure that they're the right ones. Next question here is there a difference between client solution manager and customer success manager? I'm going to say it depends. Sorry on that, because titles don't mean anything as far as I'm concerned, because you can be a CSM at 5 different companies and have a very, very different role, different roles, different responsibilities. So a client solutions manager, I don't know. I'd have to see the roles and responsibilities to say, like, are they the same as a CSM? They're all going to be different. It's a nomenclature thing. I have seen people call CSMs like customer superhero and customer ninja, things like that. Like, those names mean nothing. So it's hard to answer your question. I'm sorry. That's probably not super helpful. It depends on what the scope of the role and the work is. I would say that's probably more indicative than the title. Next one. How does your onboarding approach change if you're onboarding 1 to 2 folks instead of a larger group? these are just things to consider, right? If I'm onboarding one or two people, maybe it's a bit more tailored, it's a bit more conversational. You can lean into specific needs that they have. If you're onboarding a group, it's more difficult to be bespoke, right? Unless you're offering them their own path and it's choose your own adventure. But if you're training groups of people, the engagement and how you lean in is probably going to be a little bit different from customer to customer. So I'd say that's probably a big obvious one. I don't know that I'm re-architecting our content strategy based on the number of people that are showing up for the onboarding or participating in the onboarding. I think that that's something you can consider, but if it doesn't make a big difference based on personas, I don't think that there's much you have to do. So if I had a customer, and I'll use ClientSuccess for my example here, but we are obviously we have customer success teams who are using our product. If a company that we're onboarding has 2 CSMs or 200 CSMs, there really isn't a difference, right? We might see less participation and kind of people raising their hands and asking questions. It might feel a bit more passive when there's 200 people versus when there's 2 people. People feel more inclined to engage and have conversations. So again, my content strategy isn't necessarily different. Engagement might be. All right, we've got time for probably about one more question. If anyone wants to head over to the Q&A and ask a question. If not, we'll end on time, which is a nice treat for us. I will just see if you've got any more questions. I just ask that you please head over to the Q&A, drop your question there, and I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, we are going to wrap up. I'll give everybody one more second. Gabriel, I love you love the Google site idea. Mind blown. If you want to see the Google site that I created, I'm always happy to share that. I'm telling you, like, again, when a girl's got 2 pennies, I still make it work. So it was really, really cool. The first time I showed it to customers, they're like, "What? Where'd you build this?" And you don't need to have a graphic design background. I will say I did lean heavily into Canva. Canva and ChatGPT and Loom might be like top 3 products used on a regular basis for me outside of like Zoom. Okay, guys. Well, that said, we are going to wrap. We have no more questions in the Q&A. I do appreciate you guys joining me for another hour today. It's not lost on me. Our time is so valuable. So for you to gift me some of that today, really, really appreciate it. Hopefully you found some value in our session and this conversation. Hopefully you take away one thing from today's hour that you can go and do differently in your organization, or at least it makes you think a little differently about what you do next. I hope that you'll be able to come back next week and join me for our final session in our CS Leadership Bootcamp series. This is my favorite time of year, guys, is when I get to do these. So please come back, join me for the last session, and then we'll start talking about what content I've got in store for Q2. So I hope this was valuable to you all. Please tell your friends, invite other people if you're finding value in these. Would love to have more people join. Otherwise, the recordings will be available shortly. I appreciate your patience, and stay tuned for the bracket. The Elite 8 will be out today. Would love to see who wins. Again, I have my call in the final 4. It'd be great to see if I'm right or if I'm wrong. So everyone have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining again. See you all next week.